the situation happening in the NFL as the country continues to pray for the young football player, the 24-year-old Buffalo Bills player, who on Monday Night Football suffered a cardiac arrest on the field in live television right there on in front of a crowd of many tens of thousands in Cincinnati. And the young Mr. Hamlin is still fighting for his life tonight. His family has released a statement indicating that while he has made some improvement, he is still very much in a very serious situation as it pertains to his own survival. He is not yet breathing on his own. He is still breathing with the assistance of a ventilator. And the report that I saw before I came on, doctors, I think at the University of Cincinnati Medical Center, said that they are treating him. He's being treated while lying flat on his stomach. They're trying to clear the blood out of his lungs because he was receiving CPR, intense CPR, for an extended amount of time. And we know, CPR is meant to save your life, but it can do damage as well. So this young man's situation is still not 100% clear. And there's been a tremendous amount of outpouring, truly, because I really feel as though this particular incident really shook up the country, because America is football. Okay. In the 21st century, it's football. Maybe in the 20th century, maybe it was baseball. Maybe the latter part of the 20th century, basketball's wiggled in there to be number two, but it's football. Americans watch football, period, point blank. And the NFL is a juggernaut, not only of material wealth made up of a cabal of billionaires, but they are politically connected in this country. And really, who oversees the NFL? Nobody. But as a result, the NFL's, let me say something real quick. Actually, Colin, can you pop up Mr. Hamlin's GoFundMe, please? Because this kid, this 24-year-old young man, before suffering this injury on Monday Night Football, he had been raising money online to support his mom. I believe it's his mom's daycare, to support the kids there with presents. And he was only looking for $2,500. And since this incident happened, so far, as of now, it's probably higher, but $6.5 million has been raised to support this young man's foundation, or the toy drive that he wanted to do to support his mom's childcare and the clients there that they serve. So, but this really brings about a larger question, because this was not the first time that a young football player from the NFL has collapsed on the field in this way. And it brings up the larger questions about player safety and the ways in which this massive institution known as the National Football League, the ways in which they just consume the bodies of mostly African-American men. And after that, after their playing careers are over, they are left dealing with these lifetime of debilitating injuries and disabilities, and they're left with very little support. So joining us today, I would like to welcome, I'd like to say a good buddy.
Yes.
Justice journalist and sports reporter, a person who I believe navigates both lanes exceedingly well and stands at the intersection when it comes to covering these kinds of incidents and beyond. We're joined today with Chuck Modiano. Chuck, thank you so much. I'm so happy to see you. Welcome to Status Coup.
Kim, great to see you again. It's been a little bit, and just great to talk to you about anything. But there have been better circumstances, but we tend to get together when the circumstances aren't great, which seems like more often than not.
Well, and Chuck, the reason I call on you is because, you got good sense and you tend to get things correct, especially when it comes to race and class and how these things combine amongst each other when it comes to professional sports. And, talking about what's going on with number 3 for Buffalo and not just him, but also, I'm going to mess this young man's name up. I'm so sorry. But the quarterback for the Dolphins, Tua Tagliavolia, is that right? No, it's not.
Tagliavola.
Okay, close enough. Thank you so much for that. And how so far, I mean, this season, Chuck, we have seen these kids collapse as a result of being hit with really just devastating effect, with the young man from Miami, Tagliavola, suffering, I believe, 3 concussions this season. 2 of them is when he just got knocked out completely on the field, much to the horror of everybody watching. And people, I believe, Chuck, I feel like what happened on Monday Night Football just this week has kind of changed the conversation about the importance of this game over the health and safety of players. How are you reading this?
What's really important here is that it did capture the national attention. It did happen on Monday Night Football. It was unprecedented to some degree. There was a player who died in 1971 once before that I didn't even learn about till today, and it was cardiac arrest. But when these things happen, they're usually someone has a gruesome knee injury. If it's the worst we generally see is a paralysis on the field. That we've seen. But what we have not seen, I have never seen, is someone on the field need to be resuscitated through CPR to save their life. And that is somewhat new, besides that with this one case in 1971 that people don't know about. And the hit wasn't particularly a vicious hit and whatnot. And, you know, it's a dangerous game, and it shows that anything can happen, because the hit that we saw is a hit that we've seen thousands of times. But what I think you said something really important that I'd like to engage with you is you didn't just talk about what happened on the field and player safety, but you talked about what happens after a young person retires, after someone leaves the NFL, and what does that look like? And that's the real crime that goes even beyond his own life. So, yeah, that's a conversation we need to have. So I'm glad you're engaging that.
Absolutely, because I mean, Chuck, you've written about this, and trust me, as somebody who is a disability rights advocate, I appreciate that kind of coverage, because, you know, I mean, there's a lot to be said about where NFL players come from in terms of their socioeconomic background when they begin, because a lot of people really don't have sympathy for these players once they leave the game, because they say, hey, you made all these millions of dollars. Maybe you should have saved. Maybe you should have invested. There's no reason why you should be, you know, so broke down and unable to care for yourself. But, you know, and that's a class conversation that we may not even be able to have. But talk about how players have had to really, really fight. And even the $1 billion, I believe NPR reported on that today, about the settlement reached with the retired NFL players, or those who brought that class action suit against the NFL and were able to settle for $1 billion. But I said, that sounds kind of low relative to the amount of profits that NFL owners and the league have undoubtedly reaped off the labor of these football players.
That's right. And you know, you have to go back to the collective bargaining agreement from a few years ago and we spoke about it together at the time, and I appreciate that. But Eric Reed, who's most known outside of football for kneeling with Colin Kaepernick, but gets forgotten in those Colin Kaepernick discussions, he was also blackballed. And he came back for a minute, and then he was blackballed. But let's understand why. He was fighting almost single-handedly against the new collective bargaining agreement that is corrupt. And I will also say the players union, there's corruption within the leadership of the players union that overturned an executive committee vote to reject the CBA. So there's a lot of money in the NFL, and it infects the players union as well. So what happened was disability benefits were cut. Impacting 400 players. That's what Eric Reed was fighting most about. I'm of the opinion he's blackballed more for that, because he was messing with the billions now in a very different way. So that's a very important conversation. And this is an extension of that conversation, because Damar Hamlin only has 2 years in the NFL. Okay. And you need 3 years to be vested to get retirement benefits. So that would be cut off to DeMar Hamlin. Now, we've heard some leadership in Troy Vincent say he will be taken care of. Well, if that's the case, and if there were to be some exception, it would be because DeMar Hamlin has the national attention. But then what about the bigger problem? What about the gangsterism of the NFL that leaves all of these players broken down, often concussed, bad knees, injuries, needing medical care for the rest of their life, and less likely to be able to qualify for disability because they made that more stringent. And that's a real conversation. And I actually want to engage your point. You said, well, we don't have time to have a class conversation. I think we have to have, with the NFL, that class conversation too, because I will make the argument that the average NFL player, I'm not talking about the top 10 players who make gazillions, the average NFL player whose lifespan is 2.5 years, is like the regular lifespan of NFL player, is more like you and me than the multimillionaire who's set for life. And I think it's important that we have to make that argument for people who dismiss their lives, okay? Because when I have a bad day at work, I don't walk away with a concussion. I don't walk away and I can't walk. My brain's not so scrambled that I am putting things that should go in the oven in the freezer, stories that I hear from family members. So we have to engage that class conversation for some people who may not get it.
And let's talk also, Chuck, about truly, I mean, the exploitation of the health of these players while they are active in the league. And I'm thinking about Tua, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the scariest things that you could think of after seeing a quarterback or really any player get hit in the ways that he did, and for him to fall out not once, but I believe twice on the field. And I think one of the 3 concussions, or at least one instance this season, Chuck, correct me, but he was cleared to play, to resume playing by those on the sidelines who were supposed to be entrusted with protecting his health. What are these players truly? I know that the league has made, I guess, some efforts to put rules into place to try to make the game safer, but at the end of the day, it's you better get on out there and play.
Yeah, and in the culture within the game, all players know about that. There's a line within NFL circles: the best ability is availability. If you're not on that field, you're going to be gone quick. So people know, the marginal players know, and most players are marginal. Most players are replaceable. There's only a few on each team, really, who hit that level of, you might need me for a while. And outside, you get to a handful at most on each team. People have to understand there are 45 people on a team. The other 40, the majority make minimum wage. The majority of players make a minimum wage. And a minimum wage, so you say, oh, the million. But if your average career is 2 years or 2.5 years, and you've prepared for that career your whole life, well, you have to stretch out those 2 million over, 20, 30 years, and you have to think about it like that. So it is important to see, as I said earlier, that the players' lives are closer to our lives than the multimillionaires.
But also, Chuck, I mean, the players have to be protected against themselves, right?
Yeah.
Because the players understand that it's the next man up mentality. And if they're not out there, then someone is going to take their place. But and they want to go out hurt, concussed,
Yes.
And the NFL allows them to continue to basically grind their bodies into the ground. Like, I don't understand how these are not OSHA violations. Like, I don't see how players and people, workers basically, can be allowed to continue to play hurt. But I guess this is America. Everybody went to work with goddamn COVID. I should not be surprised.
That's right. I mean, you make a good point about the player mentality that has been grown since they're children. That you didn't get that good by not always wanting to be out there. Now, here's the thing. So in baseball, when a manager goes to the pitcher's mound, there's never a pitcher who wants to come out of the game. The pitcher, if you ask the pitcher, they would say 10 out of 10 times, no, I want to stay in the game. I can get this man out. And you have to have the better judgment of that manager. The manager says, give me the ball. We ain't negotiating here. Give me the ball. I see something different, and it's time for you to come out. It's your arm is tiring. Now multiply that by 100, and you're talking about the NFL, because you're not talking about performance, you're talking about injury as well. And they want to get people on the field. So you brought up Tua earlier. It's a profit-driven league. They wanted Tua on the field. There's a narrative. He was going to be the star. Him and the new coach Mike McDaniel was the story. If you listen to their storyline, there were production meetings where they talked about them throughout the entire time. If you remove Tua from the game, you lose it. That was on a Thursday night, mind you. It wasn't on a Sunday. It was on a Thursday night. Amazon is a new network. They're trying to showcase themselves. So we're talking about billions of profit here. And going to the pitcher analogy, I think the most egregious thing that I saw, if you remember RG3 in his first year, Robert Griffin III, when he played for the Commanders.
I remember.
I am telling you, this man would be a Hall of Famer had he not injured. And why was he injured? He was out there hobbling on one leg in a playoff game, his rookie. His speed was critical to his success. And Mike Shanahan, Kyle Shanahan's father, the former coach of the Washington team, left him out there for dead, in my opinion. Saw him as a piece of meat, in my opinion. And when his leg buckled and his career symbolically buckled with it, he was stone cold on the sideline. And, you know, he looked like a coach who would stump for Trump and Bush, which is what he did, but he looked like that guy. And I use that example of Mike Shanahan because on one hand he's stumping for Trump, and then he's quote unquote overseeing these black players. There's a connection between not caring about that black body and not caring about RG3 as a human being. And so I think that's what we see. That's football in itself. If you take the majority of owners, probably 90% of them, they're Trumpers, and many of them actively campaign for Trump, just to give you an idea of the chasm between ownership and player.
Oh, yes, because Chuck, you hit all the nails on the head. I love the fact that you referred to Shanahan as an overseer, because basically that's what he is. And you said the NFL is a profit-driven league, much like the institution of slavery. It was definitely a profit-driven league, trying to promote and utilize and exploit the labor and the prowess of black bodies, of African bodies. And the NFL is an iteration of exactly that. And the race dynamics and the power dynamics and the wealth dynamics of this just simply cannot be ignored here, Chuck. I mean, because most of the owners, as you mentioned, are white, overwhelmingly conservative, and the majority of the players are overwhelmingly black. And also with the whites is the coaches and the majority of the management and front office positions. And it's like, it becomes more glaring to me every year when the NFL Combine comes on, where you have these college players that are vying to get drafted by these respective teams. And it looks like you have these well conditioned black men standing on like slave auctions, like they're checking their body parts and checking their teeth. I said, what in the hell is this? Every time I see the NFL Combine, it makes me so uncomfortable, Chuck. So, I mean, this whole owner well-compensated slave dynamic is very real in the NFL. And in my opinion, and by the reporting that you've done, it contributes a lot to the way that the players are treated while they are active and definitely after they have finished playing.
I mean, certainly. And, you know, it's nothing new. One of the most interesting, absurd comments I get in Twitter all the time is someone saying, how could these owners be racist? 70% of the players are black, right? I get this pretty regularly, and it's so silly. But what I tell people, if you want to get some history, if you go back to the late 1800s and the Kentucky Derby, well, the first Kentucky Derby, 13 of the 15 jockeys were black. And according to such logic, there was no racism back in the 1880s because of these jockeys and the love of diversity by all of the owners who own the horses.
Especially in Kentucky, right?
yeah, especially in Kentucky, exactly, which is a bastion of equality right now, of course. And so it's ridiculous. What is true is that if you have ability, the owner will see green. That's what is true. And so we have to make sure we understand this and not need a Donald Sterling audio tape to come up so we can hear the blatant racism on tape before we say, how can he hang out with these great black players and still be completely racist? You know, if you need that tape, we have a problem.
Or I love Jerry Jones, right? Jerry Jones showed up to the North Little Rock High School just to see what was going on. He just showed up to the Klan rally to see what the other players were doing.
Listen, he was a bystander. Jerry Jones was curious. He wanted to know what was going on, so he picked a side where he could get the best view. You know, the funny thing is, in truth, the true story is he had direct instructions from his coach at the time not to do that, not to go there. And that doesn't get spoken about enough. But when I look at somebody like Jerry Jones going back over 50 years, it's not that you were going back over 50 years. It's that we could go back in the last 5 years and not see a whole lot of change. The same Jerry Jones who's never hired a black coach. The same Jerry Jones who told his players, if you stand with Kaepernick, if you support Kaepernick, you won't be on my team. He said that publicly. So, you know what? If you sound like that kid who's there in 1957, and I don't see a whole lot of change, you're going to be held accountable for that picture when you have made no growth whatsoever.
Well said there, Chuck. And lastly, before I let you go, you know, the NFL has such an oversized presence, I believe, in American culture. Now, contrary to what some goofy Americans think, the football does not really extend far beyond our borders. I know the NFL is trying to get some traction over in Europe. I don't know if the Europeans are checking for American football, especially comparative to what we just saw this summer and the galvanization globally of the World Cup, right? Yeah. The NFL does not compare globally as a game. But when we look at the amount of power that this league wields economically, locally, in local politics, I mean, the NFL, where they have stadiums and where they have franchises, they're shot callers where they are, you know, to entice politicians with their own boxes at the stadiums and to get sweet legislation or any kind of fucking thing, right? I know, for example, M&T Bank Stadium in Baltimore, the Baltimore Ravens Stadium, the M&T Bank Stadium accidentally went into auction because the stadium had not paid the city water bill in a long time. And goofily, somebody was able to pick up on, this was years ago, you guys can Google it, but somebody was able to pick up on it and actually made a bid for M&T Bank Stadium. And then obviously that did not happen. But regardless, these are usurpers of public utility. They still, and I say still, they steal tax funds, tax subsidies that are helping billionaires to build stadiums, using public money to do that, exploiting the community for very cheap labor, displacing communities when it's time to build a new stadium. I'm thinking about Inglewood, California, SoFi Stadium. That's a black and brown area. They displaced so many people and gentrified it that it's probably not going to be black and brown for very much longer. Thanks, SoFi Stadium. But the NFL is a harmful entity by all intents and purposes, Chuck. And is it going to take seeing these kinds of very graphic injuries that happened to Tua and that happened to Darvin? Is it going to take that to sort of awake a new consciousness in Americans to make them understand? And I know I'm asking a lot here, but to make them understand that the NFL, as I guess entertaining as it can be to some, it's brutal and it does a detriment to the public good ultimately.
I mean, I hope so. I watch on Sunday and criticize on Monday. I mean, that's what I do, but I hope you're right. But that's just fair. So people have a context.
Yeah.
If you took the top 100 rated shows last year, the top 100, 75% of them are NFL games. 75 of the top 100. There's no close second. It's like the biggest gap in NBA and MLB. There's no close second. If 1 million people left tomorrow, they'd still be by far and away the biggest entity. And as such, they call the shots. And you mentioned the stadiums. You mentioned their welfare for billionaires, which is basically billionaires hold a team hostage. And they say, give me that public money. And if you don't give me that public money, we're going to jump ship. We're going to leave town. That's what we're going to do. So what these billionaires is they hold the city hostage and they make the taxpayers pay that tax. So this is like legal blackmail, which is awful. And I'll say this as a journalist, My real aha moment of just how powerful the NFL are to make something go away is the best journalist report, investigative report that I've seen came from Al Jazeera, and it was about Peyton Manning. It centered Peyton Manning, and they did a 9-month investigation, and they basically learned they charged Peyton Manning with using HGH during his off year. And I could actually almost defend that on medical reasons. He had a broken neck and all of that, but that's beside the point.
Older player.
He's an older player, and they said half the Green Bay Packers were using HGH, and it was explosive, and it was video, and it was undercover, and they had a dealer that you could go online and watch the 45-minute presentation, and it was the most damning presentation I've ever seen, caught on video. And here's what happened. They showed it before the Super Bowl. Peyton Manning denied it, said that's a terrible report, and every journalist covering it fell in line. And it was so absurd that how they defended that. They said that the person who was secretly recorded knew who was secretly recorded for months and went along with it as a joke. That was the defense. And when I saw that the NFL would back Peyton Manning, but not just back Peyton Manning, but shut down the entire NFL media from having a real critique and writing articles, I said, wow, that is a powerful entity. And if they can do that, they can do anything.
Yes, and they will. And Chuck, before I let you go, I'm going to leave you with a prediction here, because you and I are, you are a New Yorker, now a Washingtonian. I guess.
Yes.
But anyway, Chuck, I'm telling you, Dan Snyder's not going to sell the team. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I don't see it happening. I
don't think he will. But Dan Snyder could end up being an asset. Because Dan Snyder, there are rumors that Dan Snyder is the one who released that Jerry Jones picture.
Of course, it was him.
I can't substantiate it, but all of a sudden, it pops up, and he's spiteful enough that he might push out some dirt. That's the way we find about police. If a disgruntled police officer puts out dirt or accuses other officers, that's the best way to find out. I'm hoping Dan Snyder sticks around and gives us the dirt on the other owners, shows us the emails.
That is the class warfare between the billionaires I am here for. When I saw the report that Dan Snyder said that he has dirt on all the NFL owners and he's going to be leaking it, and then that picture from 1957 came out from Jerry, I said, of course that was Dan Snyder. Who else did it? And so I can't wait to see the rest of the dirt he got on the rest of the owners. So yes, I hope he doesn't sell until he has released 30 more pieces of dirt on the remaining NFL owners. Listen, we have been joined today with justice journalist and sports journalist. He stands at the intersection of both, covering race, class, and inequity in society and within sport. We've been joined today with Chuck Modiano. Chuck, thank you so much for making time to join me today. I truly, truly appreciate it. It's really good to see you. I like your hat. Yes,
Kim, great to be here as always.
Thank you, Chuck. Take it easy, man.